signal from the abyss. The wind screamed across the desolate ice of Antarctica, a relentless howl that battered the rusted walls of Polar Hum Station. It was January 15th, 2026, and the sun hung low on the horizon, casting a pale, eternal twilight. Over the frozen wasteland, Dr. Ellen Reed, a 42-year-old astrophysicist with sharp gray eyes and a perpetual frown, adjusted her parka, her gloved hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of the task ahead. Beside her, Thomas Kane, a 35-year-old engineer with a scruffy beard and a nervous tic, wrestled with a crate of equipment, his breath fogging in the 50°C air. A few yards away, Alina Voigt, a 28-year-old technician with a buzz cut and a scar across her cheek, checked the satellite dish, her movements precise despite the frost creeping up her boots. The three of them had been airlifted to this abandoned research station in the middle of nowhere, tasked with a single mission: to capture signals from deep space, part of a last-ditch effort to revive a defunct SETI project. Polar Hum Station had been shuttered since 1987, after its crew vanished without a trace. The official report blamed a blizzard, but the logs told a different story, ramblings about a voice from the abyss, a signal that drove the team to madness before they disappeared. Ellen had read the files, dismissed them as hysteria. She was here for science, not ghost stories. Thomas, on the other hand, was a believer, his eyes darting to the shadows as they approached the station's entrance, a steel door half buried in snow. Alina, pragmatic to a fault, just wanted to get the job done and go home. "Let's move," she said, her voice muffled by her scarf. "I don't want to be out here when the wind picks up." The door groaned as Thomas forced it open, the hinges screaming against decades of rust. Inside, the station was a tomb of ice and decay. The main hall was a cavern of frozen pipes and shattered glass, the walls streaked with frost, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and something sharper, metallic. Emergency lights flickered weakly, powered by a generator. They'd started earlier, casting long shadows across the floor. Desks were overturned, papers scattered, some frozen to the ground, their ink smudged but legible. "It's in the signal. It knows we're here." Ellen ignored the chill that ran down her spine, focusing on the task. "Set up in the control room," she ordered, her voice echoing through the empty space. The control room was a mess of outdated tech, analog dials, reel-to-reel recorders, a massive radio telescope receiver linked to the dish outside. Alina got to work, her fingers deftly connecting cables, while Thomas hauled in their modern equipment: a laptop, a digital signal processor, and a high-sensitivity microphone to capture any anomalies. Ellen calibrated the receiver, her hands steady despite the growing unease in her gut. The station creaked around them, the ice outside groaning under the wind's assault, and every sound seemed amplified in the silent strips of melting ice. The hum of the generator, their own ragged breath stopped by midnight. They were ready. The dish outside, a hulking structure of steel and ice, was pointed at a patch of sky near the constellation Eridanus, a region known for its deep space anomalies. Ellen initiated the scan, the receiver humming to life, a low buzz filling the room. At first, there was nothing but static, a comforting white noise that reminded her of late nights in her university lab. Then, a signal broke through a low, pulsating gull, like a heartbeat, steady and deep, resonating through the speakers. Alina frowned, adjusting the dials. "That's not right," she said. "It's too structured. It's not background radiation." The gull grew louder, its rhythm hypnotic, and Ellen felt a pressure behind her eyes, a dull ache that spread to her temples. Thomas clutched his head, his face pale. It's in my skull," he muttered, his voice trembling. Alina turned the volume down, but the sound didn't fade. It seemed to come from the walls now, vibrating through the metal, the ice, the very air. The temperature in the room dropped, the thermometer on the wall plummeting from 10°C to 30°C in seconds. Frost crept up the windows, forming jagged patterns that looked almost like words, though Ellen couldn't read them. The gull shifted, forming sounds low, guttural, a language none of them recognized. It was rhythmic, deliberate, and it sent a shiver down Ellen's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Alina recorded it, her hands shaking as she watched the waveform on her laptop, its peaks and troughs forming a pattern that looked alive. "This isn't random," she whispered. "It's trying to communicate." Thomas laughed, a high nervous sound. "Communicate? It's messing with us. Can't you feel it?" He was right. Ellen felt it too, a creeping dread, a sense of being watched, as if the signal was aware of them. Then the voices started. At first, they were faint, woven into the gull, but they grew clearer, more distinct. Ellen heard her father, dead for 10 years, his voice soft, pleading. "Ellen, open the door. Let me in." She froze, her heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat. Thomas heard his sister killed in a car accident when he was a teenager. "Tommy, I'm so cold. Help me." Alina's eyes widened, her face draining of color as she heard her grandmother, who died when she was a child. "Alenechka, they're waiting for you." The voices overlapped, a chorus of the dead, their pleas turning to demands. Open the door, and the gull pulls faster, louder, a drumbeat that shook the station. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the room into darkness. The only illumination coming from the laptop screen, its glow, casting their faces in a sickly blue. The temperature dropped again, the thermometer now reading 70°C, an impossible cold that burned their skin, their breath freezing in the air. Ice formed on the equipment, cracking the dials, and the walls groaned, black, vein-like structures, pushing through the metal, pulsing in time with the gull. They were organic, glistening, and they moved, slithering across the floor, reaching for the trio. "We need to shut it down," Alina shouted, her voice barely audible over the signal, which had become a scream, a cacophony of voices and static. She yanked at the cables, but they wouldn't budge, the ice holding them in place. Thomas grabbed a wrench, smashing at the receiver, but the metal didn't dent, it vibrated, the gull growing louder, angrier. He dropped the wrench, clutching his ears, blood trickling from his nose. "They're inside me," he screamed, his eyes wild, his hands clawing at his face. "They want and they need blood." Ellen watched in horror as Thomas pulled a utility knife from his belt, his movements jerky, as if controlled by something else. He slashed at his wrist, blood spraying across the floor, freezing instantly in the cold. The black veins surged toward it, absorbing the blood, their pulsing growing frantic. The gull now a roar that shook the station to its foundations. Thomas laughed, a hollow, broken sound, and turned to Ellen, his eyes empty, his voice not his own. "It's coming." He collapsed, his body convulsing, the veins wrapping around him, pulling him into the wall, his screams fading into the signal. Alina grabbed Ellen's arm, dragging her toward the door. "We have to get to the dish, cut the signal at the source." They stumbled through the station, the corridors a maze of ice and darkness, the black veins spreading, forming a web that pulsed with an unnatural light. The voices followed them. "Ellen, Alina, opened the door," and the air grew thicker, heavier, as if something was pressing down on them. They reached the exterior hatch, the wind outside a deafening roar, the temperature so low their tears froze on their cheeks. The satellite dish loomed ahead, a skeletal structure of steel and ice, its surface reflecting the pale twilight. But in the reflection, Ellen saw something: figures, tall and thin, their bodies made of shadow and ice, their limbs too long, their movements jerky, like marionettes on broken strings. Their eyes were empty voids, and they reached out, their fingers brushing the edge of the dish. Ellen screamed, the sound swallowed by the wind, and Alina turned, her face pale, her eyes wide. "What do you see?" she shouted. But Ellen couldn't answer, her mind reeling, the gull pounding in her skull. They reached the dish's control panel, a rusted box half buried in snow. Alina pried it open, her fingers bleeding as the cold metal bit into her skin, and yanked at the wires, sparks flying as the dish powered down. The gull stopped, the silence deafening. But the voices didn't, they grew louder, angrier, now coming from the figures who were no longer just reflections. They materialized around the dish, their bodies crackling with ice, their movements erratic, their mouths opening to release the signal, a scream that shattered the ice beneath their feet. Alina fought, swinging a crowbar at the figures, but it passed through them, the metal freezing in her hands, her skin sticking to it as she screamed. The figures grabbed her, their icy fingers sinking into her flesh, her body jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Her eyes turned black, her voice joining the signal. Open the door, and she lunged at Ellen, her movements no longer her own. Ellen ran, slipping on the ice, the figures closing in, their screams of physical force that drove her to her knees. She made it back to the station, locking herself in the control room, the black veins now covering the walls, the floor, the ceiling, pulsing with a life of their own. The figures pounded on the door, their screams merging with the voices of her father, her mother, everyone she'd ever lost. Ellen, let us in. She grabbed the station's old recorder, her hands shaking, and spoke into it, her voice hoarse. "This is Dr. Ellen Reed, Polar Hum Station. We made contact. It's not what we thought. It's alive. It's here. Don't listen to the signal. Don't." Her words were cut off as the door burst open, the figures flooding in, their icy hands wrapping around her, their screams drowning out her own. The station went dark, its signal lost, its location vanishing from radar. But across the world, radio stations, satellites, even car stereos began picking up a new signal, a low, pulsating gull, followed by voices, pleading, demanding, "Open the door." And in the frozen wastes of Antarctica, the ice groaned as if something beneath it was waking up.